55 solar inspections across Minnesota and asked us if we can do it in 9 days.
Welcome to Elevating Drone Life. Each week, we'll be speaking with professionals from all walks of the drone industry to learn about their experiences, insights, and tips for success. Welcome to Elevating Drone Life.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Elevating Drone Life. December 16th, and here in Northern Colorado, it is 67 degrees. Probably not that different than where you're at, Teej, at this point in time. But anyways, maybe we can talk about that later, or maybe not. I'm Rob Burdick with Drone U, and I am really, really excited to welcome Teej Ragsdale, co-founder, CEO, I believe, I'm sure of, and co-founder of RAAD, an aerial intelligence network is what it is. And I'm going to let Teej talk a little, if not a lot more, about what that means in the coming hour or so. But it's been interesting just kind of looking into your background a little bit. It's quite varied in a really cool way. It seems like you've done some really cool stuff, which may come out in the conversation. Some of it probably won't. But my point is you got a nice, well-rounded background that's led you to the point of what you're doing now. So let me turn it over to you, Teej, and let you tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Fantastic. First of all, Rob, thank you for having me. This is, as we've discussed before, a huge full circle moment for me. About 2 years ago when we were starting RAAD, and I guess I was getting up to speed or drinking from the fire hose, trying to understand the complexities of this industry. Drone U was a formative resource for me. So to be on the other side is an honor, and I very much appreciate that. But yeah, my name is Teej, founder and CEO over at RAAD. RAAD is a end-to-end aerial intelligence network. We scalably monitor critical infrastructure in the US and abroad. So think, solar, data centers, commercial real estate, bridges, and the like. And as for me, my background is indeed varied. It's funny, our careers feel so random and serendipitous in the moment, but looking back, it all seems to have some coherent logic.
Absolutely.
But in any case, I started my career in traditional finance. I was at a hedge fund trading pools of commercial mortgages. COVID came around. I decided I did not want to have a boss anymore, or at least one that I wanted to have a good boss I could learn from. So I absconded. I moved to Turkey for some time, and I came back and really started my entrepreneurial journey. And I started in crypto, built for about 2 years there, and then went out and actually built a battery company. What we were doing is setting up kind of new age commercial scale battery storage co-located with wind and solar assets. And in the course of that, what you sort of learn is in deploying alongside these large renewable developers and asset owners is a lot of these guys are sort of flying blind with regard to the status of their assets. They don't really have a tight gauge of the performance of these assets, the damages, and really a way to prioritize how to bring these assets to full performance. And so I kind of started thinking, in the back of my head, as we wait for kind of the Western world to reindustrialize, if you will, to learn how to build critical infrastructure again, what is kind of the scalable game plan for monitoring all of the older ailing infrastructure that we all rely on to live our lives and to build our businesses? And it wasn't obvious that someone had built kind of a scalable solution. So in starting RAAD, we really sought to build a set of eyes that could help us monitor and protect the critical infrastructure that we all rely on. And drones were really very obviously the dominant tool that would allow us to do that. But no one, it seemed, had built a kind of a standard or a coordination layer that took the world's drones, the world's commercial drone pilots, and enabled them to kind of deliver this critical service for solar operators, wind operators, data center developers, and of course commercial real estate landlords at scale. And so that was really the nugget, the insight that led us to start RAAD about 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting when you use the word serendipitous. It, in a sense, it's logical that even though it seems like we're bouncing around, we're working or progressing within ourselves, so to speak. So of course there's some connection, right? And ultimately, as you look back, it makes more sense than it probably did at the time or whatever. And I've always thought that about my crazy career as well. Paul still calls me a frijito contador, bean counter, because that's what my training is. And then here, look at me interviewing Teej from RAAD. So it's cool. I mean, you just never know, but somehow it all connects in a logical way most of the time.
Well, I think a nice thing about getting older too is you kind of care less about what kind of the world or your peer group or your parents think. And so you become more and more comfortable being more and more authentic and leaning into your own strengths and just kind of leaving the weaknesses in the background. And so I think over time, as we kind of develop that confidence in ourselves, we're naturally aligned towards journeys and missions that are actually better suited to our kind of dispositions, our talents, and our convictions. At least that's my theory.
No. I think that makes tremendous sense. And there's an adage. I'm obviously older than you. I don't want to say how much older. I don't know, but probably more than people think. But there used to be this adage of figure out what you're not very good at and what you need to improve on and really work on those things. But I love what you just said. Leave your weaknesses behind. Why not? And this is something over the last whatever number of years, decades, I've finally learned is no. Focus on what you're good at and what you know you can do well and go all in on that. And I love that. Leave your weaknesses behind. I'm going to use that. So that's actually a really good way to kind of encapsulate that concept, which I think is really important. Especially nowadays. I don't know. We wanted to get, there's so many asides that we could probably take today that I'm going to try to avoid just because these conversations are a lot of fun. So as you were looking at founding RAAD, obviously you saw kind of a hole in the market and some opportunity, which is, some problems to be solved, which is where most businesses derive from, and created, the network that you've created. And so, obviously, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. There have been other similar networks in the past. And so I would love your summary as to, and you alluded to it, if not stated it, and kind of your opening there, what some of these things are. But how is RAAD different from your perspective? And what are you trying to do differently that's going to benefit both the industry and drone pilots sort of on a higher level?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we started, it was obvious pretty much immediately that pilots were deeply unhappy with the state of drone services networks broadly. And, the first intuition when you see something like that is to say, well, the model's just broken. It doesn't make sense to build something in this vein. But the more we dug in, it became obvious that there's nothing wrong with the model. There just hadn't been a kind of competitor to come along and actually methodically drill into the frictions and the problems of the market. And so what we saw is, pilots unhappy with these systems where, they would be bidding against one another, driving the costs of their services down to zero, not have a whole lot of support from the networks or the platforms, be blamed for, every inaccuracy in the data, and not really being equipped with a set of tools that allows them to do more business more consistently and easier. It seems like they were just kind of a cog or a commodity in a broader machine that didn't prioritize them. And I think broadly, that was right. And that to some extent continues to be right. And many of these networks in our experience, or even DSPs broadly, we think they sort of make a false choice where they say, well, the client is the hand that feeds us. And so they are to be prioritized at all costs. And so pilots kind of just fall by the wayside as a kind of a part of the cost structure. That's how they're treated, less as kind of humans, as skilled practitioners of a craft of delivering some insight to a client, but really just a line item. And that to us was not only unfair, but wrong, because we think it's one kind of circular loop where if you can consistently deliver a quality data product to the client, they're going to come back and they're going to do more work, which then puts more work in front of pilots. So where does that leave us? The first thing we realized we needed to do was have transparent, fair pay such that pilots could engage and build a book of business. So, we avoided completely the whole idea of a bidding war. And we can talk about later why we think that is such a problematic mechanism. But obviously it wasn't working. And so what we do is, we pay a fixed rate to the best possible pilot for that job. And we can talk about how we route and we match pilots to jobs a little bit later. And the second thing is, we sought to not be a network or a broker. The pilot matching is one piece of a larger equation, which is how do you enable an asset owner to make the right decisions? So there's a series of tools you simply, in our view, must build to support pilots in getting paid a lot of money for consistent work, right? For us, whether it's built-in airspace restrictions, a flight planner that builds in weather conditions to ensure that the time they're capturing is optimal for the data set, to a quality control tool that ensures they can leave the site and they know they're going to get paid. So it's really just a portfolio of tooling and a team on the operations side that support them to be excellent and to do more work and make more money. And so we really focused on that on the pilot side, right? So that's one part of the equation. And what we saw is that, with support, pilots do really good work. And when pilots do really good work, we deliver great data to our clients. We deliver great data to the clients come back for more volume, more frequency, bigger projects, more complicated projects, and pilots sort of love that. And then on the client side, what we saw is the expectations for quality were so low. If you and I were, sitting and having coffee talking about an emerging industry, and I told you that, the defect rate of this industry was 20%, you would laugh me out of the room. 1 out of every 5 products is defective, yet, we have a refly rate that is, depending on different numbers, somewhere around 20%. That's insane, right? And so, how can clients meaningfully transact at scale, big demanding clients, if 1 out of every 5 flights needs to be repeated? So we said, well, we need to build at our core a guarantee and a stamp of quality. Yeah. And so, we built quality control tools, direct bucket to bucket data streaming, really low latency matching of pilots and streaming of data so that both sides of the house, when they come to RAAD, there's a guarantee that there is a seamless, delightful experience. And that's really the approach that we've taken. So in many ways, not super crazy moonshot, just a bunch of basic business principles that we try to do right. And so far, it's working pretty well.
I love it. It of course, is essentially going back to first principles and then executing well. And there is tremendous success to be had from that. All of that said, you started RAAD in, if I remember right, April of 2024, so relatively new. Sounds like you've come a long way pretty quickly. What's been the response so far from pilots that have been in your network?
It's been fantastic. So, early on, we had this kind of classic chicken and egg problem where, we wanted to deliver to clients, but we didn't have the pilots, and we wanted to onboard pilots, but there wasn't any work, right? And so that was kind of a fun process in, how do you build the hearts and minds of a network on both sides?
Right.
And so the beginning was very slow going. I had thousands of 15 or 30 minute calls with new pilots, and that was what was required to convince folks that we were doing something different, right? There was so much distrust built in, but we had to do all the stuff that did not scale. And that was kind of the feature and the focus early. But pilots have been awesome. They've been tribal. They've been consistent. They've offered their feedback about new tooling. Same thing on the client side. And what's really interesting is, today we get a lot of our work from pilot referrals.
Interesting.
And this from the very start was a big part of the model, which is, there are a lot of great pilots out there that, get work across the country. And they're like, what? I would love to be with my wife and my sons this weekend. How can I monetize this lead, right? And so, typically they'd call up a local pilot, but we built enough trust with our pilots that they're referring a lot of work to us because they know we can staff that. Yeah. And I think ultimately that is the signal of trust and network, that great pilots are willing to push us work rather than just the reverse. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of transition from being completely distrusted as just another network, trying to take too much money out of pilots' pockets to, pilots are, so passionate and trusting in RAAD that they're willing to put work onto the network has has really been fantastic. And today we're up around 5,000 pilots. We're in the US, we're outside of the US, we're doing work in Latin America. So even the process of porting the RAAD platform in different languages and managing different regulatory regimes has been super interesting. But we are our pilots. Like we owe everything to them. Ultimately, they're doing the work on the network. We build a piece of technology that's hopefully super helpful to them. But I can't be grateful enough that especially the early guys took a bet on us, and I think it's paid off.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that obviously it's obvious now that the emphasis that you've put on the pilots is sort of the golden ticket, if you will. But it's not obvious, or others I think there might have been some lip service to that, right? With some previous and maybe some existing, and certainly I'm not calling out anyone in specific and will not name any names, but I just think just industry wide, there's probably been some lip service to that, but there's been enough call it hard evidence to suggest otherwise. So I think that's great. And you're absolutely right. Referrals are the end all be all, no matter what's being referred, that person trusts you, likes you, believes in you, etc. So that's cool. So on that point, I kind of took from that if a pilot is part of your network and then they send business back to RAAD, is there some compensation mechanism for them in that scenario?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As simple as that.
Very cool. Love it. Okay. And I'm going to jump around a little bit. I mean, just so everybody knows, Teej and I, we kind of went back and forth a little bit as you would expect and have a little bit of a plan for this. But obviously, the conversation sort of will take us where it takes us. But I'm curious. I think, just kind of thinking out loud here, some of the other drone networks, I would imagine the revenue to pilots, it started at whatever level it was at, and it probably, if anything, diminished over time. And I'm wondering why from your perspective, and I'm wondering if what you've been able to build so far is allowing you to charge more or to customers, or is it just that much more efficient? Why should a pilot believe, other than other pilots are referring people to you, that it is different and that it can be different? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So let me start with the first question first. I think the reason that margins for networks go up over time and take rate for pilots go down over time is primarily because many of these networks are built to service work in a very linear way. What do I mean by that? As you see these networks grow, their ops teams balloon to support the complexity and the volume of that work. Mm-hmm. And when your costs grow linearly with your revenue and you have investors, you need to find somewhere to increase the quality of earnings. So you end up paying out less to pilots and keeping more for yourself. So from the start, most people assume RAAD has 35, 40 people at this point. And we're still a small, lean team. And the reason for that is we build technology to solve problems. We build a platform to scale with the workload. And so what that enables us to do is ensure that we are paying pilots well and that we attract high quality pilots because we're keeping most of the money in their pocket. So any pilot you talk to, I think you will find that the lack of bidding is refreshing. Mm-hmm. And the fact that their take-home pay is commensurate to the work. I think that's really important because if pilots do not feel the pay is commensurate, you're naturally only going to have entry-level pilots that are trying to get into the industry.
Yep.
If you have only entry-level pilots, you're not going to be able to compete meaningfully on high-ticket, complex portfolio scale work. It's just not how it works. So for RAAD, I think it's a combination of a few things, but the fact that, we have a few really strong operational people, pilots will have talked to Chris or Dean or anyone in the rest of the team, but, we're not growing that team to 40. We build technology to solve those problems. And so we can do a lot more work at a lot more volume while having good economics for ourselves, but also passing through excellent economics to pilots themselves.
Yeah.
I think on top of that, as I think about kind of the really reasonable problems pilots have had with these networks, I don't think it's just about pay in an absolute sense. I think it's about a trend. I think it's about a transaction. Do they feel like they're getting value from the transaction with these networks? And so when you talk about $1,000 of pay, right? One pilot could say, this is sufficient. Another pilot could say, this is insufficient. What RAAD is trying to do is build a series of tools and a platform that makes pilots super pilots, that makes it easy and consistent to deliver work. And so when you have a set of tools, when you have a staff that pilots feel supported by and backed by, I think it's a different sort of interaction than simply a pilot dealing with some broker who sits between them and the client and tries to take as much value as possible. We're serving a product to our pilots just as much as we're serving a product to our clients. So I think it's about delivering value to both sides of the market, not inherently about I'm not being paid enough for what I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And interestingly, once that gets traction, everybody wins. It becomes a self-perpetuating success multiplier in the sense that obviously you can charge more because your product's better and it's not 1 out of 5 that suck. And then you can pay more. So it's a great cycle if you can get that going. And it sounds like you guys are doing that. So what does it take? So you've got about 5,000 pilots. Let's talk about them a little bit more. What does it take for a pilot to come into your network and you guys be excited about that pilot joining your network? What are you looking at about them sort of at the very beginning?
Yeah. So look, we don't, we don't take a really strong opinion on pilots or clients or regulatory or any of this stuff. Our goal is to make sure that our pilots have meaningful work and our clients get their data on time.
Okay.
So in terms of what we look for in pilots, like of course, high quality pilots with more sophisticated hardware and sensors are going to be able to access higher paid work. But our goal is to provide work for the entire spectrum of pilot capabilities and willingness to work. Yeah. So if pilots want to be weekend warriors with a Mini 4, we have work for that, right? We do a lot of residential inspections, whether solar or otherwise, that is perfect for that cohort of pilots, right? It allows them to get work. It allows them to make extra money. It allows them to upskill. But then at the same time, right, we have, multi-thousand acre LiDAR scans in the Philippines that a pilot up here is competing on or is delivering on. Mm-hmm. So for us, we're not looking for anything in particular.
Sure.
Our goal and our platform's objective is to identify the part of the market that you're able to meaningfully transact at and putting that sort of work in front of you. Right. So for us, reputation management, a sophisticated reputation graph that understands not only hard skills about pilots, your location, your fleet, sensors, certifications, flight hours, but also soft skills. Like how is your communication? How is your reliability, your accountability, your personability, your ability to liaise with a site rep? We have built at great cost, a reputation system that allows us a really granular understanding of every pilot's capabilities, which allows us to make that promise to a client, which says, when you come to us looking for a particular deliverable, we will find you the perfect pilot for that job. Mm-hmm. So it's not about looking for any one thing. Sure. I think it's about just really deeply understanding the capabilities of our pilot network and the requirements and expectations of our client network.
Understood. So if somebody comes to you and says, I guess I'm just curious about the specific vetting process. We have had way too many drone pilots over the years that had more money than they probably should have been able to go spend on drones. And they go buy the biggest and the best and maybe 2 or 3 of them. That does not mean they know how to use those or that they can even fly them well. So what is the specific vetting process to make sure you understand that a pilot's going to fit in where you need them to fit in according to what you just laid out?
Sure. So I'll talk about this in as much depth as I can without revealing too much secret sauce about how reputation works. But broadly, there are a few kind of table stakes inputs, if you will. So Part 107 is required to do any work on the platform. So, there are obvious table stakes things such as that. Then if you're not in the right location, you're unlikely to see work because we want to not encourage the market to incur travel and lodging costs. If you have the wrong sensor, right, if you don't have an infrared sensor, we're not going to send you out on a thermal O&M inspection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are the basics. But when it comes to the more complicated stuff, right, such as how do you decide whether to send a pilot who's just onboarded to RAAD onto a really important client mission? So every new pilot that has not done work on the RAAD platform will go through an onboarding, right? They will meet someone on the ops team, and that's an opportunity for us to get to know them, but it's also an opportunity for us to vet their skill set in the context of the particular mission they may be staffed on, right? And we have a kind of a process that allows us to very quickly understand if we're confident in sending a pilot out. So at the beginning of RAAD, every pilot would have an onboarding because that's what we had to do, right? That's what we had to build trust in the network. Now at 5,000, it's not possible for every pilot to have an onboarding. So typically it's only at the stage of potential dispatch that we'll run them through kind of a technical text to make sure that we're confident sending them out on a client site. Now, after this is when kind of the reputation graph gets pretty interesting, which is every interaction a pilot has with the network, good, bad, or ugly, is logged in some way, right? So we have scoring. And what we'll be rolling out in the new year is tiers of pilots. So S, A, B, and C, that will allow them to access certain tiers of work, right? So all of a pilot's transaction activity in the network, their earnings, their turnaround speed, how quickly they uploaded, how they liaised with the site rep, all of these things are kind of transformed into a quantitative score, which then represents a reputation, which is a proxy for kind of your future earnings power and access to jobs in the network. So really smart pilots, right, realize this very early. Some pilots have done, $20, $30, $40,000 worth of bookings with us. There are guys that are just ruthless about getting the job done on time and to spec. And what they'll see in 2026, even already, is that's going to be hugely, hugely beneficial to them. And so this process of reputation really pulls the quality of the pilot network much, much higher. And even new guys, they see these S-tier pilots getting this top tier, transmission and distribution portfolio scale work. And they're like, I want to be there.
Yeah.
And so it creates a system of incentives that ensure that rather than a race to the bottom that we've seen for so long, we see this really nice floating to the top, which clients, of course, love.
Absolutely. No, that's great. So a couple of questions on that point. Do customers see the scoring? And the reason I asked that, because I asked like if I go to look for a restaurant in a new town, if I'm on Google and it's 4 or 5 or less, I'm probably not going to check it out, which could be a mistake. But so if, I was just wondering if customers saw that, then they might kind of run into the same thing. And then that just creates a divide that grows and grows and grows, which would be difficult. But that's not happening.
No, that is not the case. And part of the reason that's not the case is, in our experience, one of the challenges of kind of the total drone services market cap is a lot of clients, they don't want to deal with any of it.
Yeah.
They're not actually interested in drones at all. They want the data in their inbox on time. And so from RAAD's perspective, our view is we want to abstract away as much kind of decision-making, analytics, uncertainty, disputes from our clients as possible. We want them to give us a really tight spec of what they expect, and then we back into what's required to get them that.
Yeah.
Right? So we back into the tier of pilot required to drive that deliverable. We back into the sensors and the fleet required to drive that deliverable. We back into the quality control required to back into that deliverable. And so we think like that's what really allows this market to expand is like a lot of the built world critical for infrastructure asset owners, the reason they're not consuming aerial data is not because it's not helpful. It's because it's too difficult to manage the complexity of it all, the quality control, the price negotiations, local pilots. It's just kind of a mess. So our goal is to package all of that up into a really nice, consistent package and deliver that to clients at scale. We think that's really the model that works and the only one that works.
Yeah, I love it. So have you had to let any pilots know that they're not a good fit?
We have.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's inevitable. You have enough pilots come through. It's almost like there's a right answer to that question. You know what I mean? There's just, the numbers would suggest that there's got to be some pilots that didn't fit the bill. And
totally. And for what it's worth, Rob, I mean, there are, of course, to ensure quality in the network, like, some people are going to have to receive feedback they don't want to hear.
Yeah.
But, those that are kind of meant to make it and want to compete and want to grow will take that feedback. Mm-hmm. And they'll improve and they'll come back and they'll build their reputation back up, right? We've seen that many a time.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like your first kind of foray with a new type of deliverable or a new platform, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Something may slip. It may not necessarily be due to inherent skill or lack thereof. And so opportunities to rebuild that reputation are absolutely there. And we've seen many hundreds of examples of it.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back a little bit to the soft skills that we talked about earlier. Those that have solid soft skills in that regard, they're going to have that approach. They're gonna want to take advantage of opportunities to kind of grow back into the position they wanted to be in the first place. To that point, what do you all do to help pilots in that regard? Is there training? You're not working with us. No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Anyways, so what's going on to help pilots and get them kind of over the hump if they're a good fit to be helped in that way?
Yeah, so there's really, two ways we manage this. First is in kind of the nature of the work, how challenging it is, mm-hmm. right? So upskilling is partially about education, right? You guys do a great job to do that, but it's partially about doing the thing.
Absolutely.
Right? Like if you're taking an SAT in a year, right? Like you can study like math textbooks and read a lot of books and do a lot of writing, but ultimately you should take the test 1,000 times and then take the SAT.
Yeah.
Right. So for us, if a pilot is like, hey, I'm a new pilot and I would really like to do some of your, right of way mapping portfolios. Like obviously that's not going to be a great fit out of the gate, but here are a variety of missions that are less challenging that allow you to drive towards a skill set that would be required to compete up at this high level work. So I think part of upskilling and part of education is just about having enough work at different difficulty levels that pilots can just get the reps. The second thing, as we talked a little bit about, is if we have a new pilot, like we see often a new pilot onboards and he's got an M350, right? And it's like, all right, if he's got an M350, he's probably done a substantial amount of work or his parents are too rich, right? One or the other.
Exactly, yeah.
And so for us, we don't know which is the case. And so, if we have a new solar mapping job and we're considering putting him on that job, we will spend a substantial portion of time getting him up to speed on the SOPs, the expectations, mm-hmm. the controller settings, how he's to manage communication with the site rep, access information. So we'll do sort of a real-time testing and education process to ensure he's fit or she's fit for that particular set of work. So that's really how we think about it. Now, the third, on portfolios, right? Large portfolios, customers come to us, they've got 1,000 megawatts of solar flowing across many different states. What we'll often do with all of our pilots is have 2 or 3 hours, right? Where we're training them virtually to understand the requirements of this particular portfolio, because typically they'll be taking on multiple projects in that portfolio and the SOPs are pretty tight. But it can sometimes be complex. And so we make sure that, the operations team brings them up to speed mm-hmm. for that particular portfolio. And I would say those are really the 3 ways that we ensure that, pilots are equipped when it's time to press the green light to take on the work that's ahead of us.
Yeah, no, agreed. And you're absolutely right. There's no arguing that on-the-job training is the best training. It just is. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Maybe the other one would be teaching, because we all know, if you've ever taught anything, that if you have any care about how you're perceived, you're going to really make sure you know that material before you teach it. But
it's funny you mentioned that, Rob. We haven't officially worked together yet, but it's funny when we're first getting to know pilots. All pilots feel the need to mention that they've done a course or a program with you guys.
Oh, that's cool.
Because it's a very high signal indication, right?
Yeah.
So I think you are right that for us, when we see a pilot's done a mapping course with you guys, for example, like we grant that a different type of currency mm-hmm. than a pilot that just comes out of the ether.
Yeah.
And so I think that is an important signal and absolutely valuable.
Well, that's great. That's awesome. I mean, if we can ultimately, I think we're both here. I can't believe I'm going to say this on air. I'm not a drone guy, and I never will be, but I'm a people guy, and I love people, and I love the people that we can help go do cool things with guys like you. So that's really what it's all about. And so I really appreciate you saying that. I love hearing that, as if people didn't already know that I'm not the drone guy. What's expected of pilots when they come in? Do they have to have insurance? I'm assuming, so getting a little granular here, 1099, probably not W-2 employees. What's some of just that basic infrastructure that a pilot needs to have in place?
Yeah, so everyone's 1099, at least for now. We do see the merits in a more nimble kind of W-2 model, particularly around kind of specialized applications. There's a kind of a SEAL Team 6 element to it. But 1099 for now. And in terms of insurance, all pilots are required to hold unmanned insurance. Okay. But in general, on larger portfolios, RAAD has a series of kind of corporate level policies that cover kind of the rest of the risk mitigation bundle, right? Like if you're going to be a 1099 network and also require that your pilots hold the insurance that's more customary for businesses to hold, that's not a very reasonable model. So we found a hybrid which kind of covers pilots for, their bird themselves as well as flight on those properties. And we bring the rest of the policies that pilots can benefit from to ensure that those pilots can be on site and participating in kind of enterprise scale portfolio work.
Great. Okay. No, that's perfect. Makes a ton of sense. Is there, and I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but I'll ask it. Is there an average? How do you measure? Is there an average per hour pilots are making? Is it too broad? Is there any sort of average you could share with pilots that might watch this?
Yeah, so look, we try to stay away from time-based quotes. And I think the primary reason for that is kind of the incentives that drives into the market, right? If you're paying per hour, per day, there's an incentive for projects to take longer because the longer they take, the more money you make. So what we try to do is we try to price per deliverable, right? And on performance, on completion of that deliverable. So, if we have a, solar mapping job in Idaho, and you fulfill the criteria of kind of the raw data capture, you're going to be paid $1,000, right? That's just it. It's not a day rate. It's not an hourly rate. It's not this. It's not that. It's a very simple. If you like the ticket price and you fulfill the criteria, you get paid the amount. Now, sometimes because we understand exactly how long, for example, an automated ortho mapping mission will take, we'll quote it based on a day rate, but only after understanding how long that project should take. We'll quote something at, a $1,200 day rate or whatever it may be. So in terms of kind of average pay, again, we try to list jobs all along the difficulty spectrum. I try to never list a job for less than $100. Those jobs are just not super interesting to us or our pilots. But, one-off 15-minute residential inspection we'll list at $110. And then, recently, some of these portfolios, we're paying out $15,000, $20,000 to pilots and really everything in between. So I would say the average job on our platform probably pays out $1,400 to $1,500.
Okay. I'm sure there's a lot of pilots that like that number. Obviously, there's 5,000 in there now. But how are you doing in terms of your pilot group? Are you clamoring for more, or kind of what balance have you achieved at this point?
Yeah, so I would say the market is clearing really nicely at the moment. We have a lot of pilots onboarding each and every day. I'd say somewhere between 20 and 30 a day. And they really come from all sorts of different sources. For us, we want to build as large of a pilot network as possible, so we have coverage of the entire world. That's not only about geographic coverage. We want pilots of kind of different temperaments, talents, and convictions. There's a huge range in the type of hardware people operate. There's a huge range in, the asset classes for which pilots have collected data. Do you have 100 verifiable flight hours collecting thermal data for solar? It's a very different proposition to say you have 100 flight hours and you have 100 flight hours for solar. So for us, it's really the more the merrier. We'd like to have as many pilots as possible. And really our mission, right, is for us to have as many pilots as possible, we need to continue to build a massive book of business so that we can put consistent, high ticket, compelling work in front of those pilots.
Okay. Makes sense. So shifting gears just a little bit to the customer side of things, let's start off with just maybe a kind of a survey of the markets and what you're seeing and where maybe like the top half, or where are you seeing the most demand? What are you kind of most excited about in the markets right now in terms of opportunities?
Yeah, so for us, our huge sectors, and I wish I had an 8-ball to start, but I thought it would be totally different. I thought we would be doing a lot more insurance, and really where our bread and butter today is solar operations and maintenance, so solar inspections.
Okay.
We do a ton of solar. We do a lot of data center inspections. We do a lot of T&D, particularly distribution inspections, poles and lines, vegetation encroachment, insulator damage, and the like. And we do a lot of commercial real estate inspections, not necessarily for the purposes of insurance, but a variety of other applications. So those are kind of really our big sectors today. We think that increasingly each year, there's kind of a new asset class or application that comes online. And the new year is no different. And I know I said, in our previous conversations, I couldn't talk too much about our new vertical or our new products, but I think that there are so many kind of converging technologies coming together all at once. You can talk about sensor miniaturization. You can talk about, autonomous flight. You can talk about docks. But all of this stuff is getting much cheaper and much smaller. And when you have that many technological vectors colliding like that, it means that new applications that weren't possible 2 years ago are now possible. And so I think it very well may be the case that 2026 has a series of those, a bunch of which we're working on, which perhaps we'll reveal in the new year.
Fantastic. Not much going on in ag. That seems like a really tough industry just in general.
I agree. Not much going on in ag for us. To me, it seems like that market is pretty well serviced. Margins are pretty low.
Yeah.
And also for us, I think and I don't know, you would probably know the numbers, but I think the more dominant application in ag is actually application. The actual kind of delivery of a payload to the crops, if you will. And for us, our bread and butter is aerial intelligence, right? So it's both lower margin, more commoditized, and I think we understand it less well. And there are probably experts who are better suited to handle that market at large.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I kind of think of it in the same vein as I do like search and rescue, public safety. There's a group of people involved in that are really good at what they do. Most of them are previous badge holders, if not current badge holders. And so they've kind of got that market. And I think it's kind of the same sort of dynamic happening in the ag side is what we've seen. As long as the markets are served well, that's what matters. Another thing that I didn't hear you mention, and I'm wondering if this might be something that you look at for the future, and that's just the creative side of the ledger. We've always tried to get people to, because, you typically have either a right brain or a left brain. They're interested in the technical side of flying drones or the creative side of flying drones. We've always encouraged people, if you at all can, get proficient at both. That's going to make you so much more valuable. Is there opportunity within your network for the creative side of things at all? Is it something you're thinking about? What's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's room for the creative. I mean, I think a lot of this, Rob, is we've really tried to take a kind of modest approach to what the market needs, right? We try to listen pretty closely to what is received well and what is needed. And, for whatever reason, I think a lot of the creative market is better serviced by a one-to-one, pilot to client relationship. I think creatives tend to be much better about displaying their capabilities and their portfolios, and they build a book of business, and maybe they're better salespeople. But yeah, when we have a bunch of kind of marketing and creative opportunities that do come across our desk. So we have a lot of awesome pilots with kind of Avatas and Mavic Airs and things of that nature. But for whatever reason, kind of our primary focus has been kind of on the enterprise data side. But we're open to providing those sorts of opportunities to creatives as well.
Yeah. I would imagine they'll start to pop up. And that's such a fun side of the industry, of course, right? Is getting to go down that path. Processing. Are pilots ever asked to do any processing for customers?
Almost never. At the very beginning, we sometimes did that, but part of our proposition is to be end to end, and so we have a processing pipeline that we use to ingest all of kind of the raw data that our pilots contribute, and we really like the quality guarantees of our processing pipeline. And so for us, we think in most cases, not all, but in most cases, pilots really do love to fly. And they love to be out in the field. And they're interested in doing more flying and being out in the field more. And that's really what we're trying to enable.
Yeah.
And then on the client side, right, if we're asking our pilots to do processing, many pilots are more than capable of doing so and are really familiar with the suite of software tools that do that. But it does present an element of variability to the quality of the end product.
Absolutely.
Right? We prefer to put RAAD's stamp of quality control on that, and really that's just how we're modeled.
Yeah.
The other thing is, as we talked about before, a big part of what we're trying to do is ensure that pilots get paid properly and clients get a quality product for good value. And it is our opinion that a lot of these processing solutions are really expensive just because they can get away with it.
Yeah.
A lot of them live in the cloud, and they pass a lot of the cost of hosting these services in the cloud to pilots. And so there are many pilots that are simply excluded from delivering a full deliverable because they can't afford the cloud processing solutions. So what we found out a way to do is provide a processing solution that is as good as the leading solutions for a much lower cost, because all of our compute is on premise. So we pass those cost savings through to the client so that we don't have to take that money out of the pilot's pocket.
Yeah, it makes sense. You're absolutely right. We hear that all the time. Do you guys know any solutions on the processing side that are not going to break the bank? Because we're back to the chicken and the egg question, right? That businesses deal with of, do I pay for the software to get the jobs, or should I get the jobs so that I can pay for the software? And It's a real challenge for new pilots, obviously. So I think that's great. Honestly, I think most pilots are gonna say, "Oh, that's good." I'd rather not do the processing, right? I think that's probably what you found over the last few months.
Well, and I think the industry has been around for a while, and a lot of maybe the fun, or some of the fun, has been sucked out of it. And we don't really believe in that. We think the flying part for pilots is the most fun, whether creative or otherwise, right? Like going to a solar facility or a data center and collecting data in the field with your flying robot with a sensor is awesome, right? And so that's probably what you want to do more of. The processing stuff, while interesting and technical for a certain type of person, right, of which there are a few in kind of the commercial drone pilot world, is often more of a hassle. It's indoor work, it's computer work. It's not what most of our pilots want to be doing. So we try to take that on, right?
Yeah.
Let us take that on. Let us do the messy work. Let us spend the compute. Let us worry about the quality control. And while we're processing your first data set, you're out on that second mission instead.
Absolutely. And you can find those people that do like to be behind the screen in their cocoon doing that kind of work, and then they do it. And I have to say, you're absolutely right about flying and it being fun. I said earlier that I'm not a drone guy. However, I think I meant that on the commercial side of things. If I'm having a rough day, I will hop out our back door right here and go fly a drone, and it's just glorious. So in that sense, I am a drone guy, and I totally can relate to that.
Every time it's glorious. There's so many things that we buy or so many things that we do that have diminishing marginal returns. But in my experience, flying drones, whether commercially or for fun, is very much like an extension of the video games that we all used to play, and some of us still do play, right? Like video games give you this flow state that very few other things in life can actually enable. When you're behind the sticks of your drone, you've got to be focused. You've got to be there. Like you have a responsibility. Like you're flying a robot through the air. You're fully present. That is really good, clean fun. And while we are obviously building a business and we're trying to position pilots to become really wealthy, like the fun part should also be maximized. Like as soon as we remove that from the equation, you kind of lose the plot a little bit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That your reference to video gaming, I think over the years we've seen and I think it's common knowledge now that the kids that have been playing video games are going to be a better drone pilot in the vast majority of cases than the F-16 pilot, right? Which is a fascinating concept if you really dig into it. Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Any success stories that you have that you would want to share with a the 1, 2, whatever you got. These are honestly, people resonate through stories. That's just how we are. So if you have got any, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So I'll talk about a client success story, and perhaps as kind of sort of a preamble. Our clients increasingly come to us because they have large portfolios of assets that all need to be monitored, inspected, and they just want it to go away. Yeah. They just want it to happen, and to happen quickly, and to really not hear from us until the deliverable is in their inbox. And so, we've increasingly gotten kind of a reputation for insane turnaround and logistical complexity. And a lot of that is really due to our ops team. These guys move so quickly, they do not sleep, and they really ensure that clients get what they want. And if you deliver on that proposition enough time, people come to you with some pretty ridiculous propositions. They're in a pinch. They need some data. They know that their portfolio of solar is going to be taken offline for the holiday season for testing, and they need the data in. And they're like, let's see if RAAD can do it. And usually we can. So we had one of our repeat customers who's been with us for, about 14 months come to us and ask for 55 solar inspections across Minnesota and asked us if we can do it in 9 days. And we said, awesome, great. So, that first night we didn't sleep. Yeah. We ingested those missions in the platform. We matched it to the ideal pilots. Those pilots that we had questions about, we called on the spot and tested their technical capacity to deliver. The next day, half of them were collected, and, we had started processing. And, by day 5 or 6, all of the data was in and it was QC'd, and the client was like, what the hell? Like, how is this even possible? Like, are you guys, 150 people? Yeah. And it's like, if you want it bad enough and you have a team capable of delivering, and you have a platform that minimizes a lot of the frictions, whether about finding the right pilot and assigning them, or about streaming data directly to the client when it comes in, or the QC. If you have those tools, you can really do amazing things. And so situations like that are the ones that we love, right? Like, people's businesses rely on getting the right data on time.
Yeah.
And there's so much of that out there of big companies that are simply not doing the drone thing because they don't think a solution exists for that. Mm-hmm. And so, thanks to our pilots for jumping into gear, each of them took on, 5, 6, 7 of these enormous solar fields, and we got that job done. And I think it was like a great, trust building exercise, not only obviously for the client who's, come back with many more portfolios, but for those pilots who are like, if I want this and I'm capable of doing this, I can really grow my book of business. I can head out, I can nail these missions, and I know there'll be more on the other side of this. Yeah. And I think it was an important moment for both sides, and we were really happy about it. And, we don't really need to sleep. We're here for our clients and pilots.
That's good. Sleep when you're dead, as they say.
That's right.
Hoping that doesn't happen too soon. But no, I could see where that would be a real confidence booster too, just for everybody involved. Like, hey, we can actually do this. That's a good 100%. Feeling. That's a really good feeling. It makes me think a project like that, there's like this inherent built-in demand in our world for these products that have always been there. But this new technology is like having them bubble up as, oh, hey, we should probably be doing these things. And I would imagine that's a really kind of exciting place to be as far as you guys are going to be able to provide a solution for that kind of bubbling up of this opportunity. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. It does to me. Like, how would that have been done before? They'd have just not done it, but they needed the data. You know what I'm saying? And that's got to be the thing all over.
Right. They would have not done it is typically, they would have not done it, or they would have told management that it'll take us a couple of months. Right. And then management would say, well, it's not relevant in a couple of months. And then we're back to we're not doing it, right? So, drones as a technology allow for kind of the compression of a lot of these timelines, cost savings, increases in safety, et cetera, et cetera. But that's really only a small part of the equation, because when you're dealing with drone data collection at scale, it's not only that like the drone is better than the guy on the ground. Like you need 10 drones and 10 pilots to do work in a coordinated way across a portfolio of important assets that require insurance and SOPs and access to site reps. And then you need to collect that data, ensure it's correct and timely, process the data, and then stream it to a client all in one really consolidated 5-day window, right? And when you put all of those pieces together, the application universe explodes.
Exactly.
And for us in our experience, like again, the next whatever $12 billion that this market adds is not going to come from talking about drones. The clients don't care about the drones. What the clients care about is making better decisions that make more money or save cost or save lives with regard to their portfolio. And if you can put the drone operations in a package that delivers that, then awesome, and they're happy to pay. But it's really important, I think, and I'm not just talking my own book, even for individual pilots who have no interest in onboarding to RAAD, don't talk about your service as a drone service. Talk about the value you can deliver to the guy on the other side of the phone. No one cares about your product. No one cares about RAAD. No one cares about the things that we can do. They care about how it's going to make them feel, look better, save cost, et cetera. And that's really where the focus needs to be on the sales side. And I think the road is really, really clear ahead for our industry.
Agreed. I think it makes me think of just the short little moniker. That potential customer is not a drone guy or gal. You are. They don't care. They're not as excited about drones as you are. So right. You're not trying to share hobbies, right? You're trying to solve problems and help their business be better. As it relates to some of the up and coming issues of the industry, and here I am not leaving us with a lot of time for maybe a couple of the more challenging subjects. How are you guys thinking about the potential, we still don't know, but the potential for DJI being harder to use, if not impossible to use at some point? That would be number one. And then have you started planning for thinking about 108 and BVLOS? Two very small issues.
Yeah, tiny. Let's see if I can do this in a reasonable amount of time.
Take your time. Take your time.
I mean, maybe we'll just focus on the looming 23rd as kind of the focus, because I do think it's an important topic. I think part 108 is a little bit further off.
It is a little bit.
Maybe we'll talk about the one on the critical timeline first. As I mentioned before, as individuals and professionals, we of course have a strong view about kind of the credibility and pragmatism of everything that's happening.
Yeah.
With that said, it's not really our role to have a strong view. It's our role to put consistent good work in front of pilots and continue to deliver to our customers. Yeah. So, for us, many of our customers are now coming to us with particular prescriptions about the country of origin of the hardware on their sites, right? That is happening. And typically where it starts is sectors that touch the public sector in some way.
Yeah.
Right. So, obviously the states and federal agencies, it's been the case for a while, but even large insurance companies, even large privately owned utilities, even solar facilities, definitely those on military bases, this stuff is coming. And for the first time, we are having customers prescribe particular things about drones, which before they didn't care about, right? They want NDAA compliant, they want Blue SUAS, they have to have these things. They wouldn't be talking to us about them unless it was a necessity. It's not a preference, it's a necessity. Someone told them they have to do this thing. So look, for us, what does that mean for us? We're trying to clear this market at scale. What that means is we are putting an emphasis on onboarding a wide range of drones, right? The vast majority of our fleet, or really our pilot's fleet, the fleet we tap into, is DJI. DJI make great drones. They deliver great data at a low cost. But the only constant is change. So you simply have to adapt. We are super empathetic to the fact that pilots have invested an exorbitant sum of money into certain drones. But if this happens, whether it's right or wrong, we're going to have to adapt. So for RAAD, we are and have built a substantial fleet of Blue and NDA compliant solutions so that we can continue to deliver to our clients.
Right. Yeah. That's good. This is my third, call it major industry of my career. Again, I don't want to talk about my age. I know I look at least 42. But first was public accounting, bean counter, CPA world, auditing. Next was the mortgage world, and the third has been the drone world. Figure that out. I can't. You try. Every single one of them has had a major change whilst I was a part 100%. Of that industry. Every single time people freaked the heck out, and every single time we got over the hump and everything just kept on going. It's fascinating. That's one of the benefits of getting older. You've experienced that and you're just like, it'll be fine. And it will. We'll figure it out. We always do, right?
We'll figure it out. And I think for what it's worth, the big accounting regulatory changes, whether it's Sarbanes-Oxley or Glass-Steagall or any of these things, I think relative to this ban, those had much more reasonable intents, right? There was some crisis that occurred.
That's true.
There was a crisis that occurred where a lot of people lost money. And, the regulatory authorities stepped up to try to correct the market, right? To ensure that the incentives were appropriate, consumers and businesses were protected. I think this is much different, which is part of why I think so many pilots are so upset about it.
Yeah.
With that said, if it happens, we're going to have to adapt.
Yeah.
And as a company, our job is to help pilots adapt in any way that we can, right? And so something we're thinking about a lot is, yes, a lot of the alternative solutions to DJI are very expensive. So how can we enable great pilots to continue to do work with clients that require those Blue SUAS? The answer is we provide solutions that give them access to that hardware on a gig basis. Mm-hmm. These are things that we are thinking about. Our job is to build tools that enable pilots to adapt and continue to earn a good living, to feed their family, even in a world that's fraught with regulatory change.
Hear. And I will say it is our absolute hope, and we would work towards this change not coming. If there's anything we at Drone U can do, we definitely will. But that said, you're right. You'll just have to, whether it's through RAAD or through your organization or through your small drone service provider business, people will figure it out. Last question, and it's simply, is there anything I haven't asked or that we haven't talked about that you wish I would have or that we should have touched on? Do you want pilots to know, companies to know, anything?
I don't think so. I think we covered a decent amount. Maybe just a kind of in anticipation of 2026. I think there's another feeling amongst even great pilots that a lot of these large verticals are increasingly saturated, right? Whether it is transmission distribution inspections, roof inspections, solar inspections, et cetera. As we talked about, there are going to be new applications that do come online. Mm-hmm. What's amazing about new applications, particularly those that are greenfield, that no one's ever done before, is that all of a sudden, the opportunities for earnings are back at where they were in the drone industry in 2015 or 2014, where it's a new thing, customers have new demands, and it's not as competitive because not everyone can do it.
Yeah.
So again, announcement of an announcement, but we're working on something pretty interesting for 2026. It's very different than the inspections world. It can only be serviced with drones, and we've built a set of tools to ensure that this new set of clients is happy. And so what I encourage our kind of pilots to think about is, while in traditional industries, a lot of those are going to go Blue, a lot of those are going to go NDAA. This new industry that we're focused on doesn't care about those things. It cares about having really good, high quality, consistent pilots that have a bit of creativity. And so we're really excited to kind of roll that out to the market, probably be kind of a Q1 type of approach. Okay. We haven't seen any of the big other networks or providers kind of attempt to deliver data in this industry. It's much more demanding, much lower latency and turnaround speeds need to be high, same day upload. It's going to be a proper new application. So we're excited to put that in front of pilots. And, if there's anyone who hasn't talked to us or gotten to know the team, I would suggest that you reach out, introduce yourself, and I think you'll find we're good guys.
Yeah, that leads to my last point, and that is, how can people follow you and keep tabs on what you're talking about here? That's very exciting. Or reach out to you guys if they want to be a pilot or if they want to be a customer. How should people get in touch?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to just go to RAAD.com, RAAD.com, and follow the instructions to become a pilot. I know, Rob, you did that earlier this week.
I did.
Unfortunately, I don't think we've put any work in front of you, but you probably don't have time for it anyway.
Not yet. No.
But in any case, it is a short 5-minute onboarding with all kind of the basic questions. And so that will get pilots kind of straight into the portal. They'll be able to see our mission map and all the opportunities that are available on there. And if you're really more interested in kind of getting to know us, ask questions, you can shoot a message over to Dean at RAAD.com. Dean is our head of mission operations, DEAN at RAAD.com. Or follow us on LinkedIn. We're all over. I'm often posting pull-up videos and various shirtless videos there, which people can either enjoy quite a bit or find quite distasteful, and we don't really care one way or the other.
You're gonna do what you're gonna do.
That's right. Got to.
Well, and
if you're not,
go ahead.
If you're not being authentic in this world, then I think you've lost the plot.
100%. And you live in Miami, so that's
so at least culturally consistent.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Awesome. Well, Teej, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And for you that have been watching or listening, hopefully you got value from this. Reach out if you have questions for them, or you can always reach out to us as well. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Elevating Drone Life podcast. If you were inspired, entertained, or learned something new, please share the podcast with your friends and fellow drone enthusiasts. Join us next time as we continue our mission of bringing the real world of drones to life. To learn more about the Drone U family, head to thedroneu.com, or for enterprise solutions, propsflightschool.com.